Nathan Wilson Rynell, who's going to talk to us about light pollution. He's involved in lighting architecture. Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So it's great to be here. We've had a lot. And so just a bit of background on myself. I work at lighting with a family-owned architectural lighting business in Germany, specialising in exterior and interior lighting. Why are we here? I guess a number of things, but an overarching concern of ours is how do we use less light in both indoor and outdoor? I guess less is more is a saying that we have. We always think about this room, for example. We care a lot about using less light. That's very important to us. And of course, today we're talking about a lot of other things to do with lighting, particularly for dark sky. And so I want to talk a little bit about light pollution, not from a scientific point of view as such, but more to give some very basic elements of things that you can do, that everybody can do, actually, even at home. We've heard some comments this morning about lamps and things. What are simple things that we can actually do? And I really like this image because everybody knows this piece of art's very famous. And I think, you know, for Van Gogh here, we see an environment where the village down here is dominated by the night sky. And that's a wonderful thing. I wish we had more of that. So I'm not quite sure who's in the asylum here, perhaps we are, but a big change over what you. The challenge is we actually want spaces that are fun, that are enjoyable. We want spaces that we can exist in with nature, of course, as well. Places that we love to be and can enjoy things. The challenge is, how do we do that? How do we get both of those things? I think it's very important for society as a whole that we don't end up in 7-Elevens, and we also don't end up in spaces that are totally dark. We have to get somehow a happy medium between them. So light pollution, I guess, how do we deal with it? First of all, we have to define it. And what is light pollution? And I think it's very important to understand that, as it says here, light pollution is due to the amount, first element, the amount, how much, the direction, so which direction is the light going in, and thirdly, the composition. And everyone's spoken in part of all of these things today. I think it's very important to understand light pollution has three main elements to it. And a fourth element that probably hasn't been touched on enough, probably it's more for us as suppliers, that the effect of spill light and what it does to the human viewing condition. And this is very important because glare creates a response that our pupils contract. And when our pupils contract, we see less. And so we have this downward spiral problem where the more light we have, the less I see, so I need more light. So you just sort of, it's a race to the bottom. So the challenge is, how do we create environments where all of our senses are efficient? That is, that our pupils are fully open, and then we can have less light. And in some ways, this is something that really interests us because we can see more with less light, which is a little bit opposite to perhaps the way we think. And of course, there's been a bit more discussion this morning on the ecological consequences of light pollution as such. So I'm going to be talking about light pollution as the full spectrum. Of course, dark sky is a major part of that. But light pollution happens everywhere. It happens indoors, happens in the workplace. There's a lot of discussion at the moment about how light pollution is affecting productivity. A bit of the opposite of the circadian story. We need blue light in offices to make people alert. And then we have to get rid of it at night to let people sleep. So light pollution is a massive challenge, and I think Tim talked about this morning, this afternoon, about the proliferation of light, how much light is in the universe, really, in our environments generally. We have to try and control it. So it's very important, first of all, to define what actually it is. And then, I guess, why do we need light anyway? Why actually do we need it? There's four main elements. One is safety, and there's been discussion this morning on that, whether that's relative or not. Perception or reality, I guess, is a discussion we can keep having. Orientation, I think from Ashley's presentation, a great demonstration of orientation. Of course, tourism. You know, cities are competing for money, and if you don't see their landmarks, people won't know they're there. And the fourth one, I think, which is probably more of a challenge, which is advertising and these LED media facades, even highway signage these days. It's extremely bright, throwing light from basically out control with incredible intensity. And so these are the categories of light that we need, and so we can address all of those in different ways. I'm not going to focus on all of them at all, but I want to talk a bit more now about those three elements: how much do we need, what direction, and the spectrum. So how much light do we actually need? Well, if we look at the variation in light from sunlight to moonlight is huge, and actually we can adapt very well to low light levels, but we can only do that if there's visual comfort. As soon as we introduce glare, so how much light should you have on a building facade, for example? We talk a lot about accent light in the architectural world of needing a contrast ratio of 10 to 1. If I want you to see something, I need a contrast ratio of 10 to 1. Anything less than that, you may not notice it. And so if we have a moonlit environment, I only need about 10 lux on my facade. And if I can create that light on the facade without glare, it's easily visible. So these things are all linked, actually, and it's very important that we understand how we can control them. Lighting of vertical surfaces is very important as well, because lighting of verticals is what people actually see. The human field of view is like this. So 80% of our visual field is actually vertical surfaces. So I can spend a lot of energy lighting the floor, which you don't see, or I can spend less energy lighting walls, which you do see. It's lighting for the audience. Another thing, well, it depends on how much light you need at the end. One of the issues about LED lighting is you can't change the lamp. At least you shouldn't be able to change the lamp. We can change it. It's not a one-time fixture. LEDs are supposed to last a long time. That's the idea you want to have. And the quality of the LED will determine about how much the light appreciates. So if you have a train station and you have to achieve a certain amount of light on the platform in, say, 10 years, and you have a low quality LED, that means you have to overlight it at the start. So if you need so many lux at the end, and your light source appreciates a lot, you need a lot more at the start. So by using higher quality products, you can underlight projects at the start, which of course affects light pollution. This also has an impact on, this morning we were talking about blue light as the primary light source for white LED. This will also affect the phosphodegradation. So a lower quality LED source will have a higher phosphodegradation, which means the blue light part of the spectrum dominates earlier. So the quality of a light source will affect the amount of light, which will affect whether we underlight or overlight spaces in the beginning. And we all know what this feels like. Glare. Often we talk to people about how much light there should be in a room and how to achieve that. And generally what we would say to people, if you have a choice between less glare and more light, always take less glare. Because with less glare, we have a better viewing condition and we don't need as much light. It's just basic biology. And so by having lights that throw into the night sky, have very little control, spray light, they straight away create a situation where you need more light because our pupils contract. So we must always take glare into account. And this has a huge impact, of course, on light pollution, because the more glare we have, the more light we need. And the more light we need, the more glare we get. And so you have this spiral again going on. So light pollution is directly affected by the amount of light, which also has an impact on glare. So what are we doing about it? We've, and it's part of the reason that Marty and I know each other. Marty was instrumental in establishing a joint venture at the observatory in Sydney, where we have installed or retrofitted existing luminaires with a range of different scenarios to create a diagram. So we are very interested to, we don't have all the answers, we can have all the answers. We want to start a discussion on how we can reduce reduce light pollution, how we can have less light, how we can control the direction of light, and also the spectrum. And so this is an area at the observatory that has been lit. You can see some bollards. Actually, there's some product in the meal room, if you haven't seen already, some examples of the product that have been used there. And we're doing workshops with landscape architects, engineers, stakeholders, anybody that cares about how we can provide environments with less luminaires, less energy, of course less cost, but a better viewing condition. Let's talk about now the direction of light. I mean, what should we... First of all, we should aim to know up light, because unless Richard Kelly's a very famous lighting designer, and he had a very famous saying, if you want people to see it, light it. Sort of obvious. So then why do we light the sky? If we don't want people to see, well, perhaps it's the opposite in a way. By lighting the sky, you can't see it anymore. Yeah. Alternatively, if I don't want a person to see this area of park, then why light it? If I want a person to see this area of planter or maybe some stairs, then we should light that, but I don't need to light everything around it. So we should be aiming for the least amount of light possible. Actually, Frank Gehry, a very famous architect, when he did the museum in Bilbao, his starting point was no lights. So Frank Gehry, you may know from the Simpsons, is a very famous way of designing buildings. He scrunches up a piece of paper, throws it across the table, and says, "This is my building's going to look like this, and it's going to have no lights in it." Because we don't want to see light, which is nice. The starting point is 0 light, and the end point probably is somewhere towards 7-11. We have to get somewhere in the middle of that happy medium. But in order to achieve this, we need two things. We need good design and we need good technology. It's very easy to create light or lit spaces. It's very hard to create dark spaces. So that needs good design and good technology to allow that design to occur. And so we have to think about what type of design concepts do we work with. Of course, lighting architecture is on a light facade, on light pathways. And so we have to think about the architectural detail, using existing elements of the facade or of overhangs to try and limit the light, to light the things we want you to see. And of course, good technology these days allows us to do these things. One of the big challenges, of course, in moving to LED is how to guide the light. And for a long time, we've been working with reflectors, and reflectors were great for lamps that we had a lot of power. However, their ability to control light is very limited. So, for example, the light that comes directly off the lamp, exiting the reflector, is not controlled and is therefore creating spill light or glare. With LEDs moving to lenses, we're able to project the light, so refracted instead of reflected. And with carefully designed lenses, we can actually control the light and create darkness beside the light. And this is something that is just impossible to do with a reflector. An example of that is a project down at Circular Quay, where we have a reflected light source lighting a palm tree versus a projected light source lighting the same palm tree around about the same period of same time of day with an iPhone. This one is 35 watt metal halide. This one is 12 watt LED. So one much higher impact. You see the light's on, nobody's home, so to speak. The light is just hitting the cabin. In this case, with the reflective technology, the light is spraying everywhere. So we've got 3 times the horsepower disappearing into space. Here I have 1/3 of the horsepower being directed onto the surface that I want you to see. So the combination of good design and lenses can even make the most harmful type of light, which is uplighting, more effective. And working with the environment to do so. This is another shot of the observatory where using an exterior wall grazing element here to light this element here to provide ambient light for this space, lighting the vertical surface, but using it on this wall, not on this wall, because this wall has an eave, which can help to stop and limit the upward light. And there's a very well-designed optic in this product to limit the amount of spill coming onto the surface there. So the third element of light pollution is the composition. We talked a lot about that today. So choosing the right type of spectrum, and there's many different types of spectrums around. I would just like to highlight there is a new US standard called TM30, which is has a wonderful graphical way to represent the spectrum. And so we can have different colour renderings, different colour temperatures, of course, but it's a matter of trying to choose the right one. And of course, as we've heard today, to focus on the warm colour temperatures. Another shot from the observatory. Here we see, and sometimes most of the time we like to use colour temperature to help distinguish architectural elements. And so here we see, this is not LED, of course, but the cooler colour. Perhaps these days this could be a 3000 Kelvin, and this could be a 27 or something. You get the same differentiation in colour rather than using, say, a 5000 Kelvin metal halide floodlight and a sodium floodlight. So using colour temperatures is great, but we can get the contrast by using warmer colours rather than just using cool colours and warm colours. So to finish with, very controversial slide in this audience. Light pollution is about the amount of light and the composition of the light. And so we can all affect these things. So whether it is the harshest example of architectural lighting, which is uplighting, in this case for tourism, by choosing the right technology, the right spectrum, the right composition of light, and controlling that light, we can have a far less impact on the night sky. Of course, we don't want a situation where we all have to cut our ear off to
still got all our ears. Yes.
I'll just make one little comment on your Van Gogh painting. It's sad thing that you know was starting that little studio.
yeah, life imitating art or
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.